A botnet is a network of comprised computers or devices that have been infected with malware and are remotely controlled by an attacker. They might also be called bot herders or botnet operators. With a bot network, each infected device becomes a bot or a zombie that can be controlled remotely without the owner's knowledge or consent. Traditional botnets communicate with a command and control (CNC), also called C2, server that issues instructions. More advanced peer-to-peer botnets act as both command servers and clients, making them harder to shut down since they avoid the single point of failure inherent to centralized botnets. By harnessing thousands or even millions of devices, botnets can generate enormous computing power or network bandwidth for malicious purposes. Botnets are commonly used for DDoS, distributed denial of service attacks, overwhelming target websites or services with traffic to make them unavailable. Also for spam email campaigns, sending massive volumes of spam or phishing emails, cryptocurrency mining, using infected devices' processing power to mine cryptocurrency, click fraud, generating fake clicks on online advertisements, data theft, stealing sensitive information from infected devices, and credential stuffing, testing stolen usernames and passwords across multiple sites. The term combines robot and network, reflecting how these automated infected devices work together as a coordinated network under malicious control. There's a very affecting, very well-known botnet named the Mirai Botnet. Mirai is named after the Japanese word for future, and it's malware that turns network devices running Linux into remotely controlled bots for use in large-scale network attacks, primarily targeting IoT devices, Internet of Things devices like IP cameras and home routers. The Mirai botnet was first discovered in August 2016 by Malware Must Die, a white hat malware research group. The malware exploits security holes in IoT devices that run on ARC processors. And in September 2016, the authors launched a DDoS attack on a security expert's website, then released the source code a week later. People think that's maybe to hide the origins of the attack. In September 20th, 2016, Mirai launched multiple devastating attacks, one against security journalist Brian Krebs' website that reached 620 gigabytes per second, and another against French web host OVH that peaked at nearly 1 terabyte per second. The most notorious attack back then occurred on October 21st, 2016, when Mirai targeted DNS service provider Den, resulting in the inaccessibility of major websites like GitHub, Twitter, Reddit, Netflix, and Airbnb. Mirai is very simple in its infection method. Users don't need to do much beyond leaving the default username and password on a newly installed device unchanged. At its peak, the botnet grew to 600,000 infected devices, demonstrating that novice malicious techniques could compromise enough low-end devices to threaten even well-defended targets. The creators were 21-year-old Paris Shah and 20-year-old Josiah White, who co-founded ProTraf Solutions, a company offering DDoS mitigation services, a classic racketeering case where their business offered protection from attacks their own malware created. After the source code was released in 2016, numerous variants emerged. There was Satori in December 2017, which exploited a zero-day flaw in Huawei HG532 routers, Okiro in January 2018, the first variant targeting ARC processors, Masuta and Pure Masuta in January 2018, which weaponized D-Link router vulnerabilities, OMG in March 2018 transformed IoT devices into proxy servers, and Wicked in May and June of 2018 targeted Netgear routers and CCTV DVRs. In 2024 and 2025, researchers discovered the Corona Mirai variant exploiting CVE 2024-7029, a command injection vulnerability in the Avtech IP camera device's brightness function. The first active campaign began on March 18, 2024, though analyses showed activity as early as December 2023, and the proof of concept had been publicly available since at least 2019, but only received a CVE assignment in August 2024. Despite the affected Avtech camera models being discontinued for several years, CISA stated these devices are still used worldwide, including by transportation authorities and other critical infrastructure entities. On October 29, 2024, a Mirai variant botnet launched a record-breaking 5.6 terabytes per second DDoS attack lasting only 80 seconds, originating from over 13,000 IoT devices, targeting an ISP in Eastern Asia. The average contribution of each IP address was around 1 gigabit per second. In September 2024, the FBI disrupted a massive botnet linked to the China-based threat group Black's Typhoon that comprised more than 260,000 devices worldwide, using a Mirai variant to target critical infrastructure. In December 2024, Juniper Networks warned that Session Smart Router products with default passwords were being targeted by Mirai, and Akamai revealed a Hailcock variant exploiting DigiEver DVR devices since at least October 2024. In 2025, Kaspersky identified a new Mirai variant targeting TBK DVR devices using CVE 2024-3721, with features including RC4 string encryption, anti-VM checks, and anti-emulation techniques. The gay femboy botnet, discovered in 2024, continues to target global systems with effects evident into 2025. Cloudflare reported blocking approximately 21.3 million DDoS attacks in 2024, a 53% increase from 2023. That's huge, with attacks exceeding 1 terabyte per second, growing by 1,885% quarter over quarter. Research analyzing 6 years of data from 2016 to 2022 reveals that the number of hijacked devices and scanning activity has increased over time, with Mirai signatures still actively implemented by malicious actors. The persistent threat from Mirai and its variants demonstrates the ongoing vulnerability of IoT devices, particularly those with default credentials or outdated firmware that can no longer receive security patches. The connection between Mirai and IoT botnets generally, and OT operational technology security is increasingly important for critical infrastructure organizations. Modern industrial environments are no longer isolated. Critical infrastructure facilities now have numerous IoT devices on their networks: IP cameras for physical security, building management systems, environmental sensors, smart HVAC systems, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems, and access control devices. These IoT devices often sit on the same network or have pathways to OT systems. Many of these devices are used in critical infrastructure like transportation authorities and other essential services. When these IoT devices get compromised by botnets like Mirai, they can serve as initial access points into the broader network. They can serve as pivot points for lateral movement toward OT systems, and persistent footholds that attackers can use for reconnaissance or further attacks. While traditional IT organizations worry about DDoS taking down websites, for critical infrastructure, the concern is different. Disruption of operational visibility, like cameras monitoring systems going offline, overwhelming network infrastructure that OT systems rely on for communication, and preventing remote access for operators who need to monitor or control systems. Compromised IoT devices in industrial facilities can provide attackers with things like video feeds showing physical layouts and operations, network traffic patterns and architecture information, timing of operations and shift changes, and information about security measures and vulnerabilities. The FBI disrupted a China-linked botnet, Black's Typhoon, using a Mirai variant that comprised over 260,000 devices to target critical infrastructure providers with DDoS attacks, data theft, and other malicious activity, demonstrating how botnets are being used not just for DDoS, but as platforms for more sophisticated attacks against critical infrastructure. Now, Mirai's primary infection vector is extraordinarily simple, like we said, exploiting devices that use default names and passwords. usernames, and passwords. And this is a massive problem in both IoT and OT environments. Many industrial devices and IoT sensors ship with default credentials. Organizations often don't change these defaults during deployment. Some legacy OT devices cannot easily have passwords changed without disrupting these critical operations. And the sheer volume of devices makes credential management difficult. The Corona Mirai variant exploits vulnerabilities in discontinued AvTech cameras, where proof of concept exploits have been available since 2019, but the devices remain unpatched and widely deployed today. This mirrors various OT challenges. There's often legacy equipment that no longer receives updates. There are devices that cannot be taken offline for patching without disrupting operations, and vendors that are defunct or no longer support older products. Long operational life cycles, sometimes 20 to 30 years for this equipment versus just short IT security life cycles. These all make it a challenge and thus a very desirable target. Many critical infrastructure organizations have flat networks where IoT devices are not properly segmented from OT systems, and insufficient network monitoring to detect compromised IoT devices, and limited visibility into what devices are actually on their network. Mixed trust zones, where low security IoT devices can communicate with high security OT systems. The October 2024 Mirai attack reached a record of 5.6 terabytes per second, like we said, using only those 13,000 IoT devices in just 80 seconds. So we think about what that means. Critical infrastructure organizations often have thousands of IoT devices. A single compromised camera or sensor contributes to a global attack infrastructure, and an organization's devices could be weaponized against other critical infrastructure. The issue spreads. Research shows that Mirai scanning activity and the number of hijacked devices have increased from 2016 to 2022 and continuing. We're now in the end of 2025 as I record this, and the malware is still actively targeting new devices. So organizations need to understand the active threat landscape that's affecting their IoT devices in their facilities. And leadership needs to understand that just IoT devices, if you think just IoT, that's not a good thing. It can create pathways to OT systems, so they're not just IoT devices anymore. Understanding Mirai's infection methods, like the default credentials and specific vulnerabilities, can help organizations prioritize their defensive measures. And if anomalous network behavior is detected, security teams need to recognize Mirai indicators and understand potential impacts. When procuring new IoT devices for facilities, organizations must consider security implications and avoid introducing vulnerable devices. So it's not just as simple as going out and buying what you need. Security has to be involved even in every aspect of these purchases. It's a small thing, it's a large thing, whatever you're buying that is going to be involved in the business needs to be vetted for security purposes. So organizations need to segment their networks rigorously between IT, IoT, and OT zones. They need to change all default credentials on deployment right from the beginning. They need to inventory their IoT devices to understand their attack surface. Don't disregard these. You need to monitor for scanning activity, typical of Mirai. Got telnet ports 23, 23, 23, and so on. They need to consider decommissioning unsupported and unpatchable devices. What can we do to get rid of the stuff that we cannot make secure? And they have to implement zero trust principles where IoT devices have minimal network access, and they have to monitor for these C2 communications, command and control communications from IoT devices. Mirai isn't just an IT problem anymore. For critical infrastructure, compromised IoT devices represent potential vectors for reconnaissance, disruption, and potentially as stepping stones to more serious OT-focused attacks.